Many say that money makes the world go round, but is that true? Now, money is an important part of each day. Some people become so obsessed with money that it becomes their God. But there are spiritual aspects to money. And in this edition of Truth for a New Generation, we're going to look at what the Bible says about wealth, wages, the handling of money. This is our biblical worldview topic, money, on this edition of Truth for a New Generation. I'm sure you've heard the statement, money is the root of all evil. Hi, Alex McFarland here. Welcome to this edition of Truth for a New Generation. We're talking about money. You know, I'm dating myself here, and I'm going to show my age, but when I was a child, I watched the Monkees television show. You remember the band, the Monkees? And they had a plaque on the wall. It was in many, many shots, and it said on this plaque on the Monkees set, it said, money is the root of all evil. Now, let's talk about that for just a second, because actually the statement, money is the root of all evil, it's become kind of an axiom and a saying, but that's actually a misquotation of the New Testament book of 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 10. Now, let me read this in its entirety from 1 Timothy 6:10. It says, "For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith, and in their greediness pierce themselves through with many sorrows." Think about that. For the love of money. Many people really do love money. Now, I want to say this, that money is not evil. Money is a tool. Money can be used for bad things. Money can change people's personality. In fact, sometimes people ask me, does money change you? I think maybe the accumulation of wealth or the pursuit of wealth, it doesn't necessarily change people, but it reveals character traits that were maybe latent and they're all along. It's interesting how success or hardship reveals what we are. You know, the old saying, and I know you've heard this illustration, but, it's like a tea bag. When you put it in hot water, it shows what was there, what the contents were. And success or stress can do that to us. But I want to talk about this verse from 1 Timothy 6:10 for just a moment. All right, these phrases I want to pull out. Love of money, a root of all kinds of evil. Now, the Bible has a lot to say about covetousness. The 10th commandment is a warning against being covetousness and having this obsessive desire for something that is not yours or something that you feel you can't have. And very often people try to cut corners or do things that they know are unethical to try to get what they want. I've counseled with people that have really squandered their entire lives with the obsessive, unhealthy, really almost delusional pursuit of get-rich-quick schemes and things like that. Then other people, they go into deep debt and they rob themselves of their entire future, maybe their family and even their children's future, by going deeply into debt and greedily craving things that they really shouldn't go after. Now, clearly, money must not be evil necessarily, because look, we give money to help the poor. We give money to help family members. Money can be used for many, many good things. And let's not overlook the good that money can do. And in fact, a lot of times there's the assumption regarding the spiritual state of the heart that riches are evil and somehow poverty equals piety. Listen, I've met many very godly, wealthy people, and I've met ungodly, poor people, and vice versa. I've met ungodly, rich people, and I've met very godly people of limited means and people who are poor. Jesus said, the poor you will always have with you. In this fallen world, there are going to be inequities, but how we handle money really, really is a spiritual issue. Another subject for another day, but the subject of tithing and acknowledging that God is the source of what we have. If we have food on the table, if we have clothes and employment and health and mobility and the ability to work a job, ultimately, it really is the Lord that provided those things. The Bible said it is God who giveth the power to get wealth. In other words, God, whether you realize it or not, really does make it possible for us to have anything. And when we give and when we acknowledge God's ownership of our lives, and when we don't let money become our God, we're actually acknowledging that we ourselves don't have it. We didn't get it. It wasn't our strength and ability that provided for the family. It was that God has provided. So how we handle money has moral and spiritual implications, and how we view money and ownership definitely shows the state of our heart toward the Lord. Now, stay tuned, because when we come back, we're going to talk to a financial coach. We're going to talk about how some people fall into trouble with money and what are some realistic steps out. Stay tuned on this edition of Truth for a New Generation.
Man, before I came to Charis, I was so broken.
I dealt a lot with anxiety and depression.
I didn't really realize I could have an actual relationship with God.
When I came here, I started to see God like, he just wants to have a relationship with me. It totally transformed the way I look at God.
God longs to have fellowship with you.
This is where faith comes from. It's not just head knowledge, Bible school knowledge, it's revelation knowledge that changes you.
Just been set free from a lot of the bondage I was in.
I haven't been depressed in so long.
Pretty awesome having that just weight lifted and putting on Jesus' yoke.
You come here and you meet God personally, and then He gives you a whole new direction.
This is a time, this is a season of your life that God's wanting to show you who you really are and what He's wanting to do in your life.
If you have a desire for Bible college, God's the one that put it there.
If you're considering coming to Charis, I just want to say it's going to be one of the best decisions you've made in your life.
Hi, welcome back to Truth for a New Generation. We're continuing our talk about finances and the spiritual implications of how we handle money. Very honored to welcome to the program Amy Myers. She's a financial coach. And Amy, thanks for patching in with us today on Truth for a New Generation.
Great to be here. Thank you.
And you are in what I'm assuming is probably snowy Pennsylvania, right?
Absolutely. Western Pennsylvania, we got a foot or more of snow in the last few days and more coming.
Well, better you all than us down south. But hey, let me ask you, how did you get into finances and helping people with the handling of their money?
Well, a number of years ago, we got really uncomfortable, our family, with the amount of debt we had. And so we actually read a book called The Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. And that book made me personally just despise all of the debt that we had. And it really motivated me to start getting out of debt. So once we completely got out of debt and saw the freedom that came with it and the influence that we could have, through giving, I had a heart for helping other people with that. And that's really my goal, is to help other people work through the steps to become free financially.
Are you concerned about the level of debt that most households carry? And I guess along with that question, Amy, what do you think about, on a personal level, the financial state of our country right now?
Well, right now, about 80% of Americans have debt, and about one half of us are living paycheck to paycheck. So I am very concerned about the state of Americans' finances. We really, we're hurting ourselves by living beyond our means.
Living beyond our means, that sounds like a quaint phrase my grandmother would warn about. What does it mean to live within one's means?
Well, living within your means is basically not buying things that you can't afford, putting things on credit cards and not being able to pay for them at the end of the month, and what happens over time is we end up getting comfortable with putting things on credit and like cars and homes and whatever else we might be buying, clothes, and we start to live at a higher level than we can actually afford. And then when an emergency happens, like a job loss or a health issue, something along those lines, you end up not being able to pay your bills, and all of a sudden you're living beyond your means.
And a lot of dominoes can fall. I mean, I've counseled families too that, a situation happened, lack of employment or a health issue, like you say, or maybe a major repair on your house, and it creates debt that can linger for years or even decades.
hmm And if, the typical American family is already in debt, when these emergencies happen, they end up going further in debt. So, what I teach people to do is they have a plan in place. They get out of debt, they have an emergency fund, and they're investing in their future.
Realistically, I mean, the non-negotiables like rent or a mortgage, groceries, uh,
Mhm.
what percentage of your income should go to the fixed costs?
That is a really good question. I don't have that statistic like on the top of my head. I have heard that the four walls are what you need to take care of first, being your home, your food, your clothing, and your transportation. Those are the four most important things to take care of if you're having to make a choice between, you know, what bill to pay and what not to pay.
hmm how much savings? I mean, for a comfort level, I know, it's like I read, a century ago, J. Paul Getty, they asked how much money is enough, and he said just a little bit more. But would you like to see most families have, I don't know, 3 months in savings, 6 months in
Mhm.
savings? Um,
That's exactly right. 3 to 6 months of savings is what's recommended. And really, the individual can make that choice based on their own comfort level. If they're comfortable with 3 months savings, go with that. 6 months, if their job is a little bit, not as secure as somebody else's. So yeah, that would be a personal decision. But 3 to 6 months is really what is recommended.
Amy, I can probably hear people almost thinking, have 3 months savings. I couldn't have 3 weeks savings in the bank. So here's my question. What are some realistic steps? I mean, for people to begin if they're at break even or if they're in the red every month and they're in debt. I mean, how do you begin to get to a place of solvency or even having a cushion? How do you start this
Mhm.
process?
That's a great question. And really, the first step comes down to being aware of where you're spending your money, keeping track of it. Some people like to call that a budget, but a budget has a bad rap, that word. But really, what most people find is when they implement a budget, they find all kinds of money that they didn't know they had because they didn't realize they were spending $1,000 out at restaurants. They didn't realize they were spending, $500 a month on clothing. Those kinds of things will come out when you start tracking your finances and using a budget. So, really, that's one of the biggest steps to getting control of your money. And once you see where it's going, you can start making decisions about where it should be going and making sure it goes to those priorities that you have.
When you coach people or families, I mean, you probably have to lay some really hard truth on the table. I got two questions. The first of which is this: where do people waste money most often, and they seem unaware of it?
Mm. I would say probably the biggest money waster is in cars because people they have a monthly payment, and when they go to buy a car they think, well, how much monthly payment can I afford? And then they get sucked into these 7-year loans on a car that's a much higher car than they actually need or can afford. And then they spend all this interest to these finance companies with their car payments. So that what I would say is the biggest money waster um,
Sure.
of
Uh,
all. Mhm.
a 7-year loan, and my goodness, 7 years. Most cars are, after 7 years, they're probably spent. Uh,
Exactly.
so I read in preparation for this interview, I read that the average car payment in America right now is $523 a month. I mean,
That's right. That's right.
Seems huge. Now I've been very blessed. I haven't had a car payment since 1990. I've driven some pretty ratty cars, though, but $523. I mean, that's like a mortgage payment. It seems like.
Exactly. Yeah, and you
Are,
have two of those for a family. It's a huge chunk of change.
have we just been conditioned into living beyond our means and just expecting this entitlement mentality of we expect really better than we can afford?
I think so. I think that we are, from what we see in the media and what we see our neighbors doing, we think everybody else is really well off. But really, in a lot of cases, they just look well off and they can't afford these things that they're buying on credit. So, Proverbs 22:7 says that the borrower is a slave to the lender. And I think that's the case in so many situations here in America. Like people are strapped in debt and they're feeling the weight of it, especially those with the huge student loans. It's such a burden. And I really want to help people just get free of that, because how can we live the life that God wants us to live if we're having this burden of debt and having to carry that around? How can we give the way He wants us to give?
Well, let's talk about that. I want to talk about giving, but first, let me just ask this: in what ways is money a spiritual issue?
Well, money is talked about in the Bible so much. I mean, there's over 2,300 verses in the Bible that talk about money, wealth, and possessions. And 40% of Jesus's parables were about money. So obviously, this is very important to God, very important to Jesus. And I think He knew that we would be tempted to love money more than we love God. Um, I'm reminded of the verse in Matthew 6 that talks about laying up our treasures in heaven, because where we have our treasures, that reflects what's in our heart. So it's very much a spiritual issue.
You've counseled people, I counsel people, our ministry interacts with hundreds of people a week. I got to ask this. I already know the answer, but I want to ask you, do things really satisfy?
Absolutely not. I mean, that shiny new car that you got last year just doesn't have the same glimmer to it anymore. I think we all know that things are constantly wearing out. It's not as fun to wear a dress that you got 5 years ago.
And don't we lie to ourselves? We say, you know what, I know I shouldn't, but I'm going to buy this thing because this will do it for me. I'll be if I buy this, I'll be happy. And in a sense, we're lying to ourselves, aren't we?
Yeah. And another big lie is, I deserve this. I earned this.
Preach. Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, you deserve not to be in debt. You deserve to be free. So that's a complete lie.
It's hard to help people understand something they haven't experienced before. But if you can, Amy, try to help people understand the joy and the exhilaration of being free of the slavery of debt.
Oh, wow. Well, when we paid our last car payment 6 years ago, we haven't had a car payment for 6 years. We're a little bit behind you, Alex. But it was just such a relief. It was I can't even describe the feeling of freedom and knowing that if there's some kind of an emergency, if there's some kind of sickness that comes into our family, if there's some kind of, giant house repair, it's going to be okay. God is going to provide. And not only that, He's given us the wisdom to put things in place so that we don't have to be afraid of the future. So it's really, I can't even describe to you the peace that comes with financial freedom.
Well, we've only got a couple of minutes left. Two questions, the first of which is this. Give us 1 or 2 or 3 assignments to begin to get on the path of financial health. What are some initial first necessary steps?
Okay. Well, the first thing is one, admitting that you need help. I think that's the biggest step, being willing to admit that, yeah, maybe something does need to change. And second of all, getting the help you need. There are a lot of resources. I talked about having a budget, but there's a great book I mentioned earlier, The Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. That really outlines the whole process of becoming debt free and having financial peace. There's also a very great online resource that he has called it's called it's through every dollar. Dave Ramsey Plus is the name of it. And then also, if you feel like you need like some more personalized help, you can always hire a financial coach. That's what I do. There are coaches that work virtually. There's a whole community of us. So, and I do too work virtually.
And your website is what?
Proverbsfinancial.com. You can find me there.
Proverbsfinancial.com. Well, thank you for what you're doing. And, I just want to encourage people in making a budget, whether it's budgeting your time or whether it's budgeting your money, it's a math issue. I mean, if you've got, $2,000 and you divvy out this, and this, you can see there will be enough money at the end of the month if you make a budget and live within it. Amy Myers, thank you so much for being with us on this edition of Truth for a New Generation.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Stay tuned, folks. We're going to come back and we're going to do a little wrap and a little more insight about what God's Word has to say about money and your life. Don't go away.
There is something welcoming about prepared places. At the Cove, we extend that welcome every single day. From the panoramic views, chef-crafted meals, and spacious meeting rooms, to our serene mountain lodging, stone fireplaces, and inviting rocking chairs. Our setting, carved into 1,200 wooded acres of the Blue Ridge Mountains, and our personalized service will ensure that your group's visit is both memorable and renewing. No wonder we find such great comfort when Jesus says his Father's house has many rooms that he is preparing for us. So, the table is being set. Hearthside, the fires are ablaze. The stage is lit, the mics checked. Come, experience this place prepared for you and your group at the Cove.
Money, along with subjects like love, marriage, family, friendships, life itself. Money has to be one of the most talked about subjects in all of history. And as our guest previously said, the Bible has a lot to say about money. 2,300 places the Bible mentions money. And so money does have spiritual overtones, the subject of how we handle money. Because listen, the Bible says where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And honestly, the greatest thing for your heart to pursue is God and a relationship with God. And oftentimes the Bible warns, it says that many fall into trouble because of their greed and their love for money. Now, Johann Wolfgang Goethe, the German writer, many people pronounce his name Goethe, but it's really like Goethe. He said this about money. He said, money is like time. Many people take no thought of it until they're about to run out of it. No more time, and people frantically wonder what they're going to do. No more money, and people frantically wonder what they're going to do. Now, I would submit to you that our nation's problems with money and people's personal struggles with debt, indebtedness, and the inability to live within their means, that is indicative of the spiritual state of our nation. Because honestly, being able to say no to yourself is an issue of character and a spiritual issue. We need to rediscover what maybe our grandparents talked about was the principle of deferred gratification. I say to myself, I can't afford that right now. I'm not going to go in debt. Maybe I not going to eat that right now. I'm not going to buy that $5 latte right now. And imagine all of the ways that you could save money. And I personally care about this. Amy Myers alluded to it. But, you know, within the church, there's tithing and giving. And just in life in general, there's being able to give the server at a restaurant a generous tip, the ability to be philanthropic and give. We can only give if we feel like we have the bandwidth financially to be able to give. So there is great joy. There is great joy in being debt-free. My family for decades was deeply in debt. In the 1980s, my parents, almost $1 million in debt. But by God's grace, we were able to get out of it. And I want to say Benjamin Franklin, he said this, and he was the oldest person at the Constitutional Convention, but Benjamin Franklin said, quote, "Money never made a man happy yet, nor will it. The more a man has, the more he wants. Instead of filling a vacuum, money creates one." Really. Now, Jesus said this, "No man can serve two masters. You cannot serve God and money. You will either love the one and hate the other, or vice versa." So let me encourage you. Number one, experience the most priceless gift of all, a relationship with the Lord. And let God and His Word inform how you handle your wants, your desires. And I want to challenge you, budget your time, budget your money, and let the Lord shape how you handle your finances. There's a lot of liberty and joy in that.
My beliefs aren't exactly popular.
You can tell me I'm on the wrong side of history all you want, but you won't change my mind.
That's because I'm standing on something that doesn't change.
Therefore, let us hold fast to the confession of our hope without wavering.
For He who promised is faithful.
As Christians, it's important to remember that no matter how good or bad things may seem, nothing changes our King or our call.
I want to thank you for watching, and I want to thank you for engaging with all of our fantastic digital content. And you know, one of the things we've been doing in recent weeks is the podcast with my friend Odell Cleveland. It's called I Hear Ya. You can find it at ihearya.show. Wherever you listen to podcasts, it's out there. We're talking about race, politics, culture. And Odell and I, we want to thank you for listening to the great I Hear Ya podcasts. Check it out. Share it with a friend. You're going to like it because two different guys from two different perspectives. We're talking about things. We're both Christians. He's more politically liberal than myself. I'm more politically conservative, but we come together as friends for dialogue, and that's always healthy. Check out I Hear Ya. And I want to thank you for watching the program. My book, The Assault on America, How to Defend Our Nation Before It's Too Late. The book is doing great. You're going to love it. It talks about where we came from, where the country is, and where the country's going, and why I believe we really do need a rediscovery of morality. Now, speaking of finances, we need yours. We appreciate your prayers and support for this ministry, the myriad of things we do. We're on the radio 7 days a week. We're online. We're on television. If you would give a gift of at least $75, we're going to send you 2 books. The God You Thought You Knew, 10 myths that we dispel, how to answer objections, plus 10 answers for skeptics. The 2 books plus the t-shirt for your tax-deductible contribution of at least $75. So thanks for watching. God bless you, and stay tuned to the next episode of Truth for a New Generation.